until um, we were, there were going to be Little League tryouts. And Jeffrey Warren, who is still a dear friend of mine today, he and I were going to go and try out for the Little League baseball team. Now, Jeffrey had come from the black school with me, and when we were in the first and second grade during recess, we wrestled, we fought. The boys, we fought, we wrestled, we ran. Now, Jeffrey was bigger than, he was the one guy that I could not absolutely pin. I couldn't pin him. He was stronger, he was bigger. And so we're going to, he and I, we're, you know, we love to play sports, so we're going to go and try out for the Little League baseball team. And all the guys that were out there that we play with every day, Daryl, Blizzard, the Caraway kid, all these kids that were out there we played with every day. And um, Mr. Spate called two guys, Mike Taylor and another guy, and told them to choose. And they chose. And in my mind, I'm like, well, they're going to take Jeffrey first. Obviously, they didn't take Jeffrey. I'm like, oh, okay, I see why they took that. Okay. Well, they're going to take Jeffrey now. Like, no, they still didn't take Jeffrey. I was like, no, wait a minute now. Something's up. Why don't they take Jeffrey? Like, I'm okay. But like, you ain't taking Jeffrey. And they chose all the way down, and I could see this one white kid that's standing on the mound, and he is boiling. He's boiling. And we get right down to the last person that to be picked, and it was me and Jeffrey and this little kid named Tommy Jones. And Tommy Jones had his hand, he had like polio or something, and he could only use one hand. And the other guy chose Tommy, and Jeffrey and I were standing there like, what? The next day at school, next weekend at school, the kid that was boiling on the mound came to us and said, Mr. Space straight up told us, don't choose you, that you couldn't play, that you couldn't be on the team. And I remember telling my dad, he was painting at a store nearby the field, and I remember telling him what happened. And he just shook his head and he goes, well, go play something else. And so that's when I picked up a basketball. I grew up, I think at the time that I grew up, it was a mixture. I mean, it was a unifying. The '60s and the '70s. It was like, disco was out, and I was just thinking about like the first time when disco came out, and I went to Raleigh to this nightclub and this big ball, and there was black people and white people dancing together, and everybody was having fun. I'm like, oh man, this is how it's supposed to be. And I went to college, East Carolina University, and it was at that particular point in time, there's some things that had happened in a church that I was involved in, that I pretty much decided I was just going to leave the church alone. And then but I was still had this, always have, still have, it's always alive in me, this hunger in relationship to spirit, to God. And I was in this bookstore one day and I saw this book called Hey God, What Should I Do Next? And so I bought it. And when I bought it, I was working in this bar, and this girl came up to me and she goes, would you like to know what God would have you to do next? And after looking at what I've been looking at, I'm like,
Wow.
if you think that you can tell me, yeah, sure. Long story short, that girl was a roommate of Valerie's. And she was a roommate of Valerie's. And I met Valerie later, or probably about a week later, and she came in. I'm going to tell this story. She came in with a minister. She worked for a minister and his wife. She came in, she worked for them. And my girlfriend at the time was the waitress at the restaurant, and she was like the head waitress, and she's back preparing stuff for the next day, and it's like 11 something. She's like, Lawrence, I got a table. Would you go out and wait the table? I had never waited tables before. I was off work. I was outside with Al Bonnie. We were getting ready to spark one up. And so when she came out, I'm like, well, okay. I went in there and hit it, gave it back, went in there, and I had never waited a table, went down there, and I looked at Valerie, and there was a halo. There was like a light behind her. And I kept looking and I kept looking. And the next thing I remember, the minister was going, sir, we'd like to order. I tried to give him a free bottle of wine. And so Val, Valerie and her roommate invited me to a Bible fellowship. And in this ministry that we were in, we greet each other with the holy kiss, literally. So when I saw Valerie down there, I'm like, okay. And from that point, we became friends. We worked together a lot. We got to know each other. I think our friendship developed around plants, gardening, and one thing led to another. We decided to get married. we were in the ministry, and we were doing outreach, and we were doing Black outreach. And so we had a choice between three places of where we could choose to go. They wanted me, one invitation was for me to come back and work at headquarters, and Valerie go, I don't think so. And I won't even get into that. And the other was Philadelphia. And so we went to do Black outreach. And so we had a fellowship in our home. They call them twigs. We had a fellowship in our home. And we had 3 girls, ladies, one from Baltimore, one from New York, and one from Chicago. They were all Black. And we had one gentleman that was Black, and myself and Valerie. We lived in a 6-bedroom house, beautiful place. It was a great place. And so one day Valerie comes home, and we're sitting down and we're playing bid whist, and we're having fun. We're playing cards. And Valerie walks in the house. She drops her stuff on the middle of the floor and says, I hate Black people.
No. Wow.
And so all of us just sitting there, we just listened. We didn't say anything. I think Gwen goes, whose bid is it? And we just kept on going.
Well, Lawrence, what was the story behind that?
Excuse me?
What was the story behind that?
I'm about to tell you.
Oh, okay, good.
See, one of the things that attracted me to Valerie when I first met her was an obvious difference in consciousness. There was a consciousness that she had grown, I'm going to assert, that she had grown up in that was distinct from the racial consciousness that I grew up in on the East Coast. It was like, wait a minute, this is different. Something's different about this. Let me pay attention to this individual. And we developed a relationship. Well, what was behind that is that Valerie never had much to do in the African American community at all. I mean, she didn't know. It's like she had no clue. When I first invited her over, she did not know who Earth, Wind, and Fire was. If that can give you some indication.
Absolutely.
So she did not know. And so really, there at the very beginning of our relationship in that household, being in the Black community, like being in it, like being with people, not just talking about it, but actually being with people. There was a lot of conversations that we were able to have, that we were able to process, that we were able to discuss, that we could engage. And every 5 years we think we've got it covered, then boom, here comes another one, then boom, here comes another one. There's more to process, there's more to see. Our lives have grown and changed, and belief systems have transformed, and worldviews are not what they were 20 years ago. So it's not like when it comes to a racial conversation that we've arrived at any place. Because one of the things is because we have two children
Yeah.
who think very differently
Yeah.
than their parents. My kids, at around 15, the oldest, the youngest, maybe 11, 12, came to me and say, Mom, Dad, we're probably not going to believe in God the way that you do. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I think some of the questions that we were talking about, racism and things like that. I've been thinking, like, the whole thing I've been thinking today is like, what do I say? And the word of the word that comes back to me is through I think it's through a song by Lakeside. Just be yourself, say what's on your mind. So um, when I think about what it's like, okay, racism, and the conversation came up, and I thought, well, racism. And I looked it up. Like, what is it? Like, everybody's probably got a connotation of what racism is. They got their own, they whatever. Well, what is it like if you look up the word racism in the dictionary? What's the response? Well, I never got to the definition, because when you look up a word, it gives the, what do you call it? The noun, the adverb, the adjective, it gives that symbol right beside the word. And when I looked it up, it was like racism. Racism is a noun. And I kept thinking, a noun, right? A noun, a person, place, or thing. Unless there's like new thought that I don't know about English or what a noun is. It's like my memory says that a noun is a person, place, or thing. So I'm like, okay, so racism is not a place, racism is not a person, so is racism a thing? Haven't answered the question. I don't know. But the one thing what led me in that question, away from it while I was in that inquiry, is that whatever it is, it has an impact. Whatever it is, it has its impact. Like love has its impact, hate has its impact, peace has its impact. It has an impact. So when I look at where is the impact of racism, I started this thing when I was saying in the second grade, like got integrated. Well, where I am now today is I feel like I want to retire. I feel like I want to retire. I feel like I want to retire in pointing out the effect, and to begin to address what's behind it. Not necessarily address it, but what needs to happen in relationship to what's behind it. Because I I can't even say what racism is, but I see it as a function of a bigger conversation. And if you think about it, this conversation, it just happens to be, like I was thinking about this today. I'm touching on Robert here again. It could be like weather report playing Birdland, and then it could be like Quincy Jones playing Birdland. It's both the same song, but it's got its own flavor. So it's like the conversation that I'm not detracting away from the conversation. I'm just saying the conversation of racism is a conversation that has been going on. I mean, stop and think about it. Why did it have to be? What was behind let my people go? I mean, fundamentally, I think the divine is endeavoring to communicate no one can be over anyone else because you're all mine and you're all of the same substance and you're all uniquely and differently. So it's virtually impossible for anyone to be above another or something more distinct or less than or inferior or it in the conversation that I live in, that's impossible. It's impossible because of from whence we've been created. We okay. Since I'm here, fundamentally, when I think that the challenge is, we as lovers of the divine, fundamentally, when I think the challenge is the idea, the concept of separation. That somehow or another,
Wow.
that somehow or another, that this one divine creation that created everything that is, somehow or another, we got a concept in there that we had something to do in it in a way that we can disconnect from it or disconnect from one another. Like somehow or another, the effects of racism only hurts Black people. The effects of racism don't judge. It don't care. The effects racism do what racism do. It doesn't care if you the effects see this is part of the challenge is noticing the effects of racism without producing guilt. No one has to be wrong if everybody is in the same boat. If everyone, and see the thing is, it's like I mean, like what did King say? I mean, what was his communication? 50 years, like what was he talking about then? It's not just us. I'm speaking for us all. And honestly, I think the all heard some of the all. I'm gonna take myself out of that because like growing up, what's been my experience, it has shifted. It's been all over the place. There was a season at one point in time I could read everything Black I could get my hand on. I mean, me and Du Bois was like that. And then I ran into Howard Thurman. Now, during this time of reading all this African American, and I've been blessed. Danny Stockmer brings Eldridge Cleaver to my home. So during all this time, these things are happening. I'm reading. My wife gives me this book, The Essential Writings of Dr. Martin Luther King. His speeches, his writings when he was in college, his sermons. And when I read that book, my first thought was, we didn't hear everything he said. And the one thing that I know I didn't hear was there will be dark days ahead. Because at some level, I think I can't say I went to sleep. At some level, I was unconscious of. I have to say I was unconscious at some level. Because in 2015, I noticed like a shift in the air, for lack of a better term. And I was trying to explain what was happening, and it wasn't making sense to anyone. I have that effect on people. But um, I was teaching a class, or I was in a class, it was a class, and there was this Hispanic lady in the class with me, and we were about the same age. And she said, she goes, what I'm experiencing now, I haven't experienced what I have experienced since I was like 13 years old. And when she said that, I thought to myself, thank you. I'm not crazy. Like someone else, like the vibe, like someone else. And I, since that time, since that has happened, with everything that has gone up, if the conversation of racism has taught me anything, it is about getting clear about who I am. It is not about getting clear about the condition, whatever the condition is. It's not clear about addressing the condition first. Yes, address the condition, but I need to understand from where I'm addressing that condition. Am I responding? Am I responding from within? Or am I reacting from without? I got to be clear with me. I got to start with like if there's any transformation at all, anywhere, any organization, it has to start from within. It has. I don't. It has.
It
It
has to.
has to start there. And so in these readings, um, and this is kind of, I'm gonna stop right here. But in these readings, when I was reading, um, when the king was stabbed by the woman with the letter
In New,
opener.
in New York. Yep.
Yeah, when he was stabbed, and they told him, if you'd have sneezed, you'd have been history. And his response was, I'm glad I didn't sneeze.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Howard Thurman, who King took classes under, who was a dear friend of King Sr., came to visit Dr. King the night that he was stabbed. Howard Thurman wrote a book called Jesus and the Disinherited. It is said that Reverend King carried that book with him everywhere he went.
That's right.
If you read the book, you will understand why. You will understand why he carried that book. Now, after the stabbing,
Yes.
one would think, hey, Mark, you need to get some bodyguards. You need to get a crew. You know, you need to roll like a thug or something, Mark. You just can't. But Howard Thurman came to him in the hospital and said, Martin, the time now is for you to go deeper.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
I'm saying that yes, I'm not saying racism should be addressed. I'm saying that peace should prevail.
Yes.
I'm saying love should be dominant.
Yes.
You know, like Mother Teresa, don't invite me to something anti, but invite me to something for. Invite me to something for. I mean, but the thing is that if whatever I'm going to do, whatever stand I'm going to make, whatever position I'm going to take, let me be clear. Let me be clear about where I am coming from, so that I am not dictated by the circumstances and conditions that are outside me. Because if I look at my background, I think I've been taught, if I look at my history, I think that those that have gone before me have said, hey, those situations and circumstances and conditions that you're going to run up against because of how people see you, let's just keep going. Keep moving. Keep moving.
Wow.
Last thing.
Wow.
Last thing.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
When I was when schools, I was in the class. Well, Miss Lewis, Miss Charles Lewis, Mr. and Mrs. Charles Lewis, Hazel, Miss Hazel, and Miss Hazel was very proactive education. I mean, you know, Miss Lewis, she was making kids got to where they needed to go, camps. You know, it's like getting parents involved, and you know, she's making things happen. It's like Students for Democratic Action, and we are in her basement, right? And she's got a very nice house in her basement. And this guy, the sheriff, Bull Connor, I think his name was something like that. And he was on television. He was like, as long as that's another story. As long as I'm the sheriff in wherever he was, he goes, there will not be any Negroes voting. And I remember my sister, Jeanette, other people are like, you know, we should go. And Miss Lewis comes in and she goes, no, stop, listen to what he's saying, because you will not know how to engage him if you don't listen to what is said. If you let your anger run over you, you won't be able to hear. Now, I have failed at that.
Yeah.
But I think I'm glad that she mentioned that when she mentioned that, because it gave me some space. It told me to have some altitude. It told me it spoke to me that everyone is not, that I can't judge. I can't put people in a, I can't, because everyone there. I do not, I do, I do believe that in creation, each individual that has ever breathed air or will ever breathe air is uniquely distinct from one another. So it's going to be criminal to put them in a box.
That's right.
The 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 oh, I got to tell you this. I was playing basketball, and one of my teammates, we were in a men's league in Petaluma, and one of my teammates was a painter, and he was on the same job. I was doing at a construction job that I was working on, and he was painting. And I drove up on the job, and I saw his partner in a building, and I got out of my car and I go, "Hey, um, forget his name, just call him Tom." I was like, "Hey, man, where's Tom?" He goes, "He's down about 5 other units." And so I walked down and see, and I started talking like, "Hey, man, you gonna be there Sunday?" "Yeah, I'll be there Sunday." And all of a sudden, I hear this, "Get off my property!" This noise, right? And we look at each other and we walk out, and there's this man, Harvey Rich, in a nice suit, and he's standing there, and he's just standing there, not saying anything, but you can tell he's upset. And there's this guy getting in his car, he's cussing and scared, driving off and everything like that. And then Harvey turns around, he walks back into his office. And we get back, my friend and I, we get back to his partner, and we're down there, and we're just like, "Hey, man, what happened?" And his friend goes, "Lawrence, you know, you didn't hear that dude?" I'm like, "No, I didn't hear it." He goes, "Oh, man, when you walked out a while ago, he called you the N-word, man, and went and said blah, 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 and everything." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, he did." And Harvey heard him. Harvey walked out of his office and said to the guy, "Get your things and get off my property." And they had a few words, and Harvey's last words was, I said, get your things and get off my property. That's the last thing I heard. And Harvey walked back into his office. This is, for me, this is what was authentic in that situation. Howard never said anything to me. He never. We sit down and we talk at the end of a day. We sit down and have a glass of wine. Here's your check, Lawrence. What are you doing? Where are you going? We talk. We talk. Howard never said, Lawrence, did you see what I did for you? And I was so grateful he didn't do it, because he didn't do it for me. He did it for him. He didn't need to tell me. He didn't need to, like, let me know something. He knew what was true for him. And so I'm thinking that if we work with an individual from the place of them understanding who they are, they will respond from who they are and act from that place, as opposed to reacting to us.
Wow. 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 Brilliant.
Yeah.
Sorry that you talk too much.
Brilliant.
No, that
Wow.
so rich.
I'm kind of mad at Dan that, like, you should have introduced me to Lawrence like day 2 of that you met me. Like get to the good part. You're good. Dan's great. Dan's great, but get to the good. Amazing, Lawrence. Jan, go ahead. I just want to say that, like, I read your background. I said PhD, yoga teacher.
You just see PhD. Maybe you did see PhD. I've been thinking about it.
PhD? I thought I saw Dr. PhD, but coach. But I saw, and I said, okay, this guy has some depth. Meditation coach, right? Yes. So I said, so he has some depth of grasp of the sense of what it means to be human, and how we get in contact with that, and how the peace that we want to bring to the world has to begin within us. And Lawrence, like, that is I'm still on that journey, and because I lose contact with that place, and then I start thinking that the problem is with the people around me, that is with my wife, that is with my church leaders, that is with my staff. And then I have to get back to that place and say, no, you're at war with the world, because you're at war with yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. My just personally, my conversation is, very much what you're saying. It's like, it's really, my conversation recently is, how is your personal prayer life?
Wow.
For me.
Right.
Like that's like, I'm looking at everything that is around me, but am I fueling myself? Am I in my engagement in my day? Where am I starting from? Danny Danny asked me, he goes, so Lawrence, how do you identify? And so, like, being on Zoom, and I do a lot of work in the LGBT community. So on Zoom, in some of the work I do, and some of the conversations I'm in, like a she, he, by the name, right? It's like, okay, cool,
Right.
So it's like, so I put mine. I write it, IT. It, So Danny goes, so Lawrence, how do you identify yourself? I go, write it. Because it was funny that he asked me that, because on my screen, I had like little notes. And one day I decided to take them all off except one. And that one note says, what are you identifying with? So that's the one thing I see every day, because where I am identifying is going to determine how I am engaging everything else from that point.
Wow.
Because if I'm going to identify myself, it's like, honestly, when Dan asked me the question, I go, identify myself as an expression of God. as spirit, as divine.
And it is through that lens then that you will interpret everything around you.
Exactly.
So if you live in an identity, if we get caught up, if we make an idol out of our race, skin color, or our culture, and I see myself, identify myself as a black man, and that is how I see then I'm going to interpret everything in the world through the lens of black and white.
Exactly.
Man.
Exactly. That's why I feel like there's a need for retirement, because I'm starting to look that there is much deeper, and I'm straight to the point. The thing is, if there was an addressing to what we deem as racism, what I think works in addressing it is one-on-one conversation.
Wow.
I think what
Yes.
addresses it
I'm
is
sorry.
that
I'm sorry.
you got to get to
Yes.
see. Okay, I said I do a lot of work in the LGBT community, right? So I was invited to do a
Right.
workshop that for people gender transitions, and we were going to have a conversation. We were going to, like, let's talk about life. Let's talk about, like, what's now. I grew up on the East Coast, Christian oriented background in my mind, worldview, and so on and so forth. I think I'm cool, hey, look, I'm looking, I'm all right, I ain't got no problem. Hey, Dr. Becky's my best friend. And I say the word God at the beginning. I don't know what I said. I used the word. And somehow or another, it was almost as if the room just went clink. It turned into a brick. And from my training, I, I
Wow.
was told anytime that happens, be as honest and authentic as you possibly can. And so I shared with them my thoughts. I shared with them my fears. I shared with them my judgments. I shared with them what I thought they were judging me about. And it was as if the floor opened up,
Wow.
and I began to speak not with just a person, I spoke with souls.
Yeah.
That day taught me that I can no longer engage people from a place of anything than from what's within. Because if I engage you from a place of a white person, a black person, a gay person, I might miss you. I might I might miss you because there's more. Uh, God is too creative. It's too creative to go. I mean, we as the divine expressions are complex beings. There's no one else like you. If you go to heaven, you ain't gonna find nobody out there. Well, see, me and Robert, we might could get away with it. I mean, you gotta get a little more gap in his teeth, but we might could get away with it.
Oh, it was there. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me.
No, no,
Wow. Wow.
I don't. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. No,
No,
I,
this is,
I really,
I find this
when Dan
liberating.
asked me what I really want to communicate in this particular conversation, not necessarily, I was like, well, is this a conversation? But what I want to bring to the table in this conversation is one's own power, one's own self, one's own true to one's own consciousness first, before there's any action, before there's like am I taking care of those that are around me? I'm like am I adding to the problem, or am I taking to the, because I honestly, if I'm awake, I'm doing one or the other two things. I might be when I'm asleep, but I'm either adding to the problem or I'm taking away. So if I'm going to engage, before I respond, I need to be clear about what's true for me, and I invite others to come from that same place.
And I gotta jump. Jan told you that. Don't worry about Robert jumping in. You don't have to worry about that at all.
Okay.
Because I got, and this will be my last, and then because I want to get Dan, I want to hear Dan and Jan's feedback to this amazing presentation. I mean, just talk you just did. So where you just that is the truth. That is the truth. And every time I'm confronted with that truth, Lawrence, there is a part of me that says yes, but if I'm honest, there's a part of me that says no, like you're stripping me of my black identity in this
Yeah.
battle that I'm fighting, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not through fighting this battle. Like I want
Right.
right. And that's when I realized that the sickness is not out there. It's in because then I've made an idol, even out of the battle against racism. I've made an
Exactly.
idol out of it, right? And that the only way is one-on-one conversation and to begin from your own place of peace and to bring that peace and to let that inner peace shape how you view the world. Because either you will view the world as black and white people against black people. You can view the world that way, or you can view the world as George Washington Carver viewed it, who started his science lab, took his kids outside and said, just gather rocks, 10 plates, beer bottles, and bring them in. We're going to make a lab out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, which had to do with what was in him and how he saw the world. He could have went out and said, how are you going to ask me to start a lab and I have nothing to start with? Right. But he saw abundance.
Yeah.
When most people see scarcity and
Exactly.
they blame everything around them, but it has to begin in here.
Yeah.
I'm done, Jan. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Yes. I know this is.
I'm glad you mentioned it.
When I say yes, Lawrence, I'm not trying to start a church service. That's just I do that.
No,
I
you
do
can
that with
start a
my
church
family.
service.
I do that with my homies. Yes.
No, Shady Grove Free Will Baptist Church knows what time it is. And Jump and Run Free Will Baptist Church knows what time it is. And Robert, I do want to comment, because I get what you're saying, because I understand that I want to work from the place of who I am, and at the same time, I have had an experience in the world, and I don't think it's a matter of putting one down so that the other one can be. I think it's a matter of holding them both at the same time and being responsible. I mean, it's like, the scripture says, be ye angry and sin not. So that means the way that it lands in me is that there's a way that I can be angry and it not touch my brother.
Wow.
That there's that actually, if you look at it, it feels not like a command, but an instruction. Be angry and don't sin. Right. Like well, then it makes me bring some consciousness to my anger and to be able to be with it. One of the best articles I got in a conversation with a friend around anger and upset about, just my experience in life was it was an article about the power of channeled rage.
Wow.
It blew my mind. It began to make me think that it was actually possible for me not to be subject to my anger and to my upset and to my rage. And I'm not saying, just that it's only related to me being black.
Right.
So
I'm just saying that is there.
If I may,
yeah.
I would like to talk about some of the things that are bubbling up for me.
Please.
And
yes,
that was absolutely powerful, Lawrence. Powerful. And with the work that I do, I work a lot with adults and challenges around diversity, but I have for many years also worked with students. And I often will say, for what you've gone through, your rage is a normal human reaction.
Yeah.
But we've got to help you channel that rage
so
you don't bring harm to yourself or others. And what I have found just by seeing people, really seeing them and their divine, and listening to their needs and their feelings and their concerns, it just dials down the temperature. To be able to be seen and to be heard
Wow.
by people that may not look like you, that may not have had the same experience, but to really be connected at that level. I have seen the most raging young person calm in that. And I have quite a story of, I do a lot of coaching with staff and teachers and things like that. And I had a teacher that was really she hardly really had behavior problems in her classroom. This is in a high school. She had a group of 4 Black young males in her classroom, and they just were giving her fits. And they came complaining that she was racist and different things, and she was upset with them. They were upset with her. And then everything just shifted. She told me that she stepped out of the whole situation and really started reflecting on her behavior. And she said, Jan, I saw them as human beings. I saw them as creatures. She's a person of faith. I just shifted how I was seeing them and what they were trying to communicate with me. She met with them each one-on-one, apologized for anything that she might have done that was offensive to them. Do you think she had one more day of problems with those young men?
Mm.
I mean, it
Wow.
was squashed.
Wow.
They were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it was so puzzling for her. I mean, to be accused of being a racist and that kind of thing, that's really tough to hear. But she just stepped back. I see them as human beings, and that's what I needed to do. Not these problem kids, not these kids that were trying to make my life miserable, but I really needed to see them on their humane and divine level, and had these one-to-one conversations, just like you're talking about. They supported her for the remainder of the year.
Wow.
So I think I'm
Man,
also,
that is an amazing story. That is a wonderful, powerful story. Yeah.
absolutely. And, I'm thinking in terms of the role of white people in this whole situation. I mean, what I heard you say, that anger just keeps you from hearing. On both any side of any divide, anger keeps you from hearing. So we got to get to the heart of what that rage and anger is about and channel it so that we can truly see each other and make a difference. Righteous anger is a thing, and it's a good thing. But rage is a whole different thing when you're bringing harm to yourself and to others. But I'm thinking really, it was pretty striking to me several years ago, at least, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, there was that incident in McKinney, Texas, where these preteens, they were just preteens, they were at a birthday party at a neighborhood swimming pool. And the other people at the pool did not like their presence, and they called the police. And then what we see on a video is a young preteen. I mean, I don't know that she was even 12 years old. The police officer was yanking her by her hair and then sat on her. And then these other young Black men were young. I mean, we're talking 11, sitting on the curb with handcuffs. And there was what I had missed in the original story and read about later is there was a young boy that was white that was among that party. And he could have just ran home for safety. But he realized in that situation, he was totally invisible to those policemen. But what he did is he stood there and was witness. He was a compassionate witness of what was going on. And he videoed it. And that's how the rest of the world knew about that circumstance that was so harmful to these young people.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
those are just some of the things bubbling up. I think what we really need to help young people, how do we get to the place where we're really clear in who we are? We are the divine. And if young people, if all of us are really connecting with that, and that is a lifelong journey, it just is. It's a constant growth of reminding ourselves every day, moment by moment, that we are a part of creation, and our divine creator gave each one of us Each one of our lives, no matter where our status is, no matter who or what we are, we have purpose and meaning because we have been created by the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so to help people come into that, we got to do things. It can't be a traditional way. It's got to be through conversation, being present in the moment, connecting with the people in front of us, and not just people that think like us and look like us.
Mm-hmm.
But what I heard you also say that I think is so important, it's just vital that we identify with what we stand for and not the anti and not so much what we are against.
Yes.
And that love and peace shall prevail. And those are just some key things from your very deep sharing with us tonight. I'm very moved. I'm very moved, as I knew I would be. I just knew that I would be.
Well, well, I just want to say I'm very grateful to be a part of this conversation, and I I I, I was very excited about doing this because I went and I looked at Robert's, and Dan had asked me to look at for something that Robert had done, and I couldn't find it, and I got to the church's website, and I listened to a teaching that he did like 2 years ago,
Wow.
and it was on love.
Wow.
And as soon as I heard him talk about love, there was like this relief, not like there was like an invitational relaxation, like, it was just like this peace. It's like I knew it was. I just turned it off. It was like it was enough. It was, I, I I remember. I forget what verse it was, but where Danny, I know you know where it's at. How can you say you love God? How can you say you love God when you
Yes.
can't love your neighbor? That verse.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was just part of the teaching. But I thought this is a perfect place to have this conversation because I know Dan. I mean, listen to Robert. I know. I'm like, okay, this is good. I felt blessed to be able to be a part of this.
It's amazing. Dan, you're muted. Take yourself off mute.
Robert, maybe you. There we go. Good.
There we go.
He's on now. Nope, he's back. Can you do that, Robert? Unmute him.
There he is.
Up, he's muted again.
We're both clicking. Don't click, Dan. I got it. You're on.
Okay.
Just talk.
Okay. Am I on now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Forgot what I was going to say. Okay. I know what it was. When I first came into Robert's church, Lawrence, on the wall, it says transformation, possibilities through transformation. And really, when I saw that, I said, that's a theme that I think we can really get on because of all of the possibilities in our lives that are possible if we transformation. And if we don't go through transformation, the shutdown of possibilities in our lives. And it's like, I think this is one of the reasons why we're constantly being implored to improve our hearts and to open our hearts. One of the things, it seems to me, when you get into the true center of the scriptures, there is a central theme of being exposed, open, broken, vulnerable. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger after righteousness. An attitude of deep quest coming out of you is a prerequisite for you to engage the higher elements of God, which we when you get into that conversation, if you are going into that conversation with a form built on everything I do to be okay, well, then you're not going to have the same attitude as very simply an attitude of complete openness to want to shift and change, able to reach the other. And Lawrence, one of the things that I really learned being with you in some of the trainings was to see the difference it could happen in a person's life if you just reached them. If you actually reached a single person, the difference it could make in their life. And so I'm rambling myself. I love this conversation. I think transformation of the heart is fundamental for reconciliation of this problem we're having between races, but not just that, the animus that's in society. And so I'm going back to my 60s days, peace, love, but in the word peace, and then I'm going to stop. The word peace, the opposite of all the chaos in the world, is shalom, which is peace. But it's peace in the sense of not just having a lack of conflict, but it's peace in the sense of abundance and fullness and completeness, and you're satisfied. That's shalom in the deeper sense of that Hebrew word. That's the alternative to the chaos of the world. And so we can't bridge this racial thing without also getting into the relationship our heart has, because I think at the fundamental level, Lawrence, it's judgment. It's not taking out the speck or the beam in my own eye while I'm looking at the speck in your eye. It's just another level of judgment. Yeah. And that is a deadly, should I say, sin, in the sense it is a loveless act. There's no love in that. It's all judgment, and it's not at all about being for that person. It's about judging that person. And so for me, then, the ratio is just a matter of, let's get off of the judgment, for goodness sake. We're all broken in the sense that we're all hurting in some capacity. So let's go and be for each other. And so I'm honored, Lawrence, that you came into this conversation. I am done. I'm so thankful for you guys and for the opportunity to just be on the conversation with you.
It's so rich. This was absolutely amazing. So I want to say, the three of you all, as someone coming out of the established church structure, what I deeply appreciate about Jen and now Lawrence is your ability to talk the language of the human spirit without being trapped by religious language. And that's what, like Lawrence gets what it means to be human and knows how to talk about that in a way that if you're in the church, if that's your the way you construe the world is through the lens of church language, he can talk that language.
Yeah.
But he can also talk about it, which means that he gets what's beneath what's beneath the surface of the language, what's beneath it, to what it means to be fully human. And Dan, you just blessing, because you saw. I never thought of this, the possibilities that are available to us through transformation, and also the possibilities that are blocked when we're unwilling to experience transformation. Wow. That's my closing statement right there. Wow.
So what I was going to say, just picking up from what Dan said, is that judgment and polarization, that reduces all possibilities.
Wow.
But when we are willing to transform, all kinds of possibilities open up. And just my final thought, I learned very young in life that without love, and I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about true agape,
the power itself,
the power of love through the divine. Without that, life really, what is life? What is life? With love, of the divine, life is truly worth living. And the final thing I'm going to say is that, my father and my grandfather both were very much activists for civil rights. And my father said that, it's really, we can't go about trying to change individuals. That's really not what it's about. It's really building the relationships with individuals. So what he was really about was the structural stuff, the policies, and the draconian, drug punitive society. That's what he really addressed it more as a societal shift of changes that we need to make. But we can't go about doing that by attacking individuals.
That's right.
It's really building bridges and not walls. And that's what we're really trying to do here. Really elevate the conversation to a higher level of consciousness. So we're bringing everybody along with us rather than pushing them away. So those are just my final thoughts. Does anybody have some final words before we close?
Just one. I want to get Lawrence back one of these days. And Lawrence, thank you for coming on. And we'll look forward to having you in other conversations down the road.
I love that.
I'm stealing Lawrence for my other podcasts.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I do want to.
Lawrence, and I'm going to block Jan and Dan so they can't see the podcast. And I'm going to go on and say, this is a friend that I met in Northern California. We've been friends. And they can't come on and say, Robert's like, that is not true. Like, they can't come on.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Mother. I want to say thank you. And I do want to say thank you to, anyone and everyone that has joined this podcast, this conversation. And I appreciate your engagement in this conversation, because I think the participation in something like this actually sows in the healing that is necessary, that we all want to live in. It's something we all want. We all want it to work.
We all want it to work. Looks like we may have lost Jan. So Dan, I'll close us out. So thank you guys for watching. Dan, you want to close us out?
That's all right. We'll see you guys down the road.
We'll see you all next week. We'll be back with another episode. Lawrence, thank you so much. And I do want to connect with the two of you also, because I would like to bring him on Ignite, Dan. I think he would, and plug into this. No, I want to talk about Howard Thurman, and then I want to talk about this grasp of what it means to be human, that you really, and how we identify ourselves, and this what's within us will shape how we experience the world.
Exactly.
That is just a riveting conversation to have. So I look forward to that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Good night, folks. We'll see you all next Thursday.
All right.
All righty.